Alright, my dear student, welcome back to your French language course online. This is Chidi. In the previous lesson, we were studying certain tips that can make you to speak French with a better accent, with a better pronunciation. Remember, we are trying to learn standard French here. Now, we have seen that certain letters like S or T or E and so on and so forth at the end of a word may not be pronounced. So depending on the position of a letter in a word, it may or may not be pronounced in French. We also read that in the section that I asked you to read, we also read that certain letters like C, R, F, L can be pronounced at the end of certain words. So that you have studied. Now, in order to also continue to better our understanding of this clues that will make us better speakers of French language in terms of how we pronounce words, we are going to talk about accents, French accent in this lesson. And there are 5 of them that you need to understand how they work. Depending on which of them you place on a letter, or certain letters, it will change the pronunciation of that or those letters. The first accent to look at is called accent aigu. The acute accent. So what this accent does is it changes, you will find it mostly on the letter E. What it does is that it changes the pronunciation. It changes how you pronounce the word. Now, when we were studying the letters of the alphabet, you saw that the letter E can be pronounced as E. And that is why in certain words we have je. So when you see the accent aigu on an E, that E is pronounced E. So that means that we can quickly identify 3 ways you can pronounce an E in French, depending on the word or depending on the accent that's placed on that E. The next one is accent grave. So number 2, I'm just going to take both accent aigu and accent grave together. Accent grave, which is grave accent. This is placed on an E. It can also go on an A. So grave accent goes this way, whereas acute accent goes this way. So when grave accent is on an E, that E is pronounced E. So now you see 3 pronunciations of the letter E. The first one is E. The second one is E. The third one is E. E, E, E. So some examples. If you look at a word like which means student, étudiant, This exemplifies some of the things we have learned. Et, tu. You remember the U, dion. Remember the on here, an. The T is silent. Étudiant. This is the male student. If I'm a male, I can say je suis étudiant. I am a student. Let me write it here. Je suis, this is you, étudiant. I am a male student. But if I have a female student, that student will say je suis étudiante. So add an extra E, which now allows you to pronounce the last T. So je suis étudiante. Je suis étudiant. I am a student. So back to the accent aigu, étudiant. In the accent grave, you will have things like mère, mère, which means mother, or père, which means father. Frère. So you can see mère, père, frère. That is accent grave. Remember, it can be on an A for the preposition. I cleaned up so that we can have space for more. The next one is accent circonflexe. Accent circonflexe. Accent circonflexe can go on an E. You will see some E that's like this, or it can be on an A. It can also be on I. I think you will find it on U sometimes. But mostly you will find it on E and A. It doesn't make a lot of pronunciation difference in the other letters, but in an E, when accent circumflex comes on an E in a word, that E is pronounced as E. So an example which you will run into all the time is être. Être, which means to be. Être. So accent circumflex, when you see it on an E, you pronounce it as E. So the fourth one is cédille. Accent cédille. Cédille. Cédille is placed below the letter C. Now, what it does is to soften the C in front of letters like O and A. Now, what you notice is that even in English it happens. When the letter C comes in front of O, I, or U, that C is pronounced as K. K. So that is why in English you have words like come, you have car, you have cute. So because C in front of U, A, O will be pronounced as K. The same thing happens in French. So mostly when you see C in front of O, A, U, you pronounce it as K. So that's why we were saying comment, comment. But there are certain words that take a C in front of an A or O, but uses the soft C, which is S, S. So what I mean by soft C is, let's clean up a little bit. So the letter C can give you either K or S. So it can give you the sound K or the sound S. So if you look at it, it happens in English as well. If you look at cement, like cement, that is because we're saying S here because it is an E that's coming after it. If you look at commence, 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 you see we're saying S here because it's an E that's coming after it. So those are the two options you have with C. And then so in most cases for C coming before O, A, U will be pronounced K, K. But for C coming before E, I will be pronounced S. That's why you have cinema, for example, cinema. Now, the same thing happens in French. There are words in French like CA, which we have seen in the dialogue between Chidi and Shaira. And then we put this accent grave, and then we put this accent cédille under it. That is to make us be able to pronounce this as S. And so we say sa, which means that. Ça va? How are you? Ça. So that is what cédille does. Cédille helps to soften the C, to move it from K to S in front of O, A, or U, where otherwise the C should have been pronounced as K. When we start learning verb conjugation and we look at the verb nous commençons, nous commençons, you will see another reason why this is happening. You see an O after a C, and then we soften it with a cédille. We're also going to learn imparfait in the future, which is going to be French 101, and then you see how this also happens in front of a C. But technically, then you see how this happens in front of an A C coming before an A. But what we're trying to do here, summarize here, is that cédille goes under C, the letter C, to make it be pronounced as S in front of the letter A, O, or U. And the last is tréma. Tréma. Tréma is double dot. It can go on the letter E, tréma. You can find it on the letter I, tréma. You can find it on the letter U. So For E, it still makes you to pronounce the E as E. A good example is Noel, which is Christmas. Noel. Another example with I is like Loic, which is somebody's name. So what it does in I, we've seen what it does in an E. What it does in an I, I told you before in a preceding lesson that when you have O and I, that is pronounced wa. And so that is why we can say moi, which means me, or toi, which is you. So in order to change that, this tréma helps to change that in certain words. So instead of saying loac, because if we were to just write it this way, then it becomes loi, which actually means law. La loi. But we have a C here that's a pronounced C at the end of the word. If we say loac, that's not French. So to get something that's French, this tréma helps us to move the I to E. So it helps you to move the I from either OA or E into E. So we have Loic. Loic. Another word is naïf. Naïf. Instead of nef. Nef. Why? Because A and I will give you the sound E. When you see A and I, that will give you the sound E. So we have here naïf, which is to be naive, right? Another example will be Haiti, which is the name of South American country, Caribbean country. Haiti. So instead of Haiti, this tréma helps us to pronounce this as I, E, Haiti. So that is basically what it is. Read more about these things. What I have tried to do in this past test lessons is to give you some tips on how to identify combinations and how to pronounce those combinations correctly in French. This is very important because knowing this will help you in the long run when you start speaking to people, when you start reading text, they're listening to you to see how you say those words.